In your notes, you had a table that talked about functional classes. We know structural classes. We have the anaxonic neurons, basically neurons without an axon. They're kind of poorly understood as to exactly what they do, so I really won't talk much about those. However, the bipolar neurons, structurally, they have two major processes coming off the cell body. From a functional standpoint, in other words, what are they involved with? They are involved in the sensory side of things. Not motor, but sensory. So they're involved in relaying the sensory signals to the central nervous system in some way. Now, the bipolar neurons are actually associated mainly with what type of processes? Vision, smell, hearing. So they're associated mainly with special senses. That's where we're going to find most of those bipolar neurons. So from a functional class, they're sensory. Now, unipolar neurons, these are interesting because their cell body is way off to the side. Some of these axons can be meters in length, 3 or 4 feet long, because the neuron, you take a pin and you poke your big toe, well, that signal is going to travel on one of these, and that axon is going to go from your big toe all the way to your spinal cord around L2, L3. That's a long axon. So from a functional standpoint, this is also going to be sensory. So unipolar neurons are sensory. And really that axon kind of starts where all these dendrites fuse together. So this is really the axon here. And then we have the telodendria. And then we have the synaptic terminals or synaptic knobs or axon terminals, whatever you want to call them. All three are acceptable. But unipolar are sensory. And that leaves us pretty much with multipolar now. Multipolar because it has multiple processes coming off of that cell body. So we have all these dendrites here, and then we have the axon. Now these have two different roles. All of our motor neurons are going to be multipolar neurons. So all those neurons that send signals to your skeletal muscle fibers, to your cardiac muscle, to your smooth muscle, to your glands, all those fibers that are sending those signals down the somatic or autonomic motor pathways are multipolar neurons. But we also have all those neurons that make up the brain and the spinal cord that do the interpretation and the processing of those sensory signals to decide what motor command to do. So multipolar neurons also act as interneurons. And these are what we find in the central nervous system as interneurons. These are what process the information. These are what take those sensory signals and decide what to do. Obviously not consciously, but basically by either having these interneurons turned on or turned off, either sending a signal or not. So those are the functional classes: sensory, motor, or interneurons. And if you read those, go back and read those paragraphs carefully on page 398, it talks a little bit about that functional class. It doesn't come out and say it, but sometimes it does. But for the most part, it does in there kind of talk about that.